back to Some Del of a Podcast. I always am sitting with such bad posture. Oh my gosh. This is your sign to fix your posture. However you're sitting right now or standing, fix that. Anyway, this podcast is always very like stream of consciousness, very lightly edited, just some sort of conversation with myself, but with the world around me, about the world around me. And it was born from this idea that I was always saying someday I'm going to do these things. And then I literally, there's no time like the present. There's no day like today. We all have these things we say we're someday going to do. So make your someday today and start that shit, whatever that looks like for you. This is important. Okay. Because someday never comes, we all know this to be true. Okay. Anyway. So today I kind of want to talk about why we love true crime, because we all know, I'm sure everyone knows, even if you're not really involved, like that it is a booming industry. And not like the crime itself, but like the documentation of it, the podcasts, the shows, and et cetera, the documentaries. And I think that there's a lot of different reasons, and I'm sure that the reasons vary, but why are we as humans so fascinated by these things? Like, what is it about these true crime stories that, why is it enticing to us? Why are we drawn to it? I know that I literally sometimes like I need to take a step away because it's so intriguing to me, but sometimes I will listen to it ad nauseum where I literally need to like not for a little bit because I have nightmares and then I'm like over thinking everything because literally, but you can never be too prepared. Okay. The other night, in our apartment, my partner forgot to lock the door and some man literally walked into our apartment. And I freaked out and I like made a bunch of noise and I started screaming, "Who's in here?" And it was like really obnoxious, but I think it was because, I don't know, I feel like even after that event, I was like, I didn't like how I reacted. I need to be more prepared next time. Like I need to be ready to grab like a weapon. The reason he walked in, he just went to the wrong apartment, but he just like waltzed into our door and it freaked me out. Like he came in like he was on a mission and I was like, this cannot be happening. Anyway, that little anecdote was just to say that for me, I think sometimes it helps me to be prepared for any sort of situation, especially how I show up in the world as a woman who's honestly average size, but like a small woman. It can be scary out here, especially knowing the statistics of, a lot of true crime, the victims of really horrible violence, often look like me and show up in the world like me. And so like, I guess I feel like I can never be too prepared, and it also intrigues me. And I wanted to do a little bit of research into why it's intriguing, like, sure, I can say, yeah, I find it interesting. Okay, great. But why? Why are we like obsessed with it? And why is it such an industry where people can really, at the end of the day, profit off of these horrible, horrible events and happenings? But so today I just kind of want to dive into some of that and like why we think this way in the first place. So first things first, I mean, philosophers have been talking about the differences and the argument between good and evil. Are people born bad? Are people born good? Do people become evil? All these things, these philosophical questions, things that we really do not have answers to. We can all just speculate. And partially it's that philosophical debate in our own heads, right? What is it that makes someone do these horrible things? Are people born that way? Do they become that way? Nature versus nurture, right? It's another one of these like psychological yet also philosophical conversations about what makes someone do something so horrid. And unfortunately, we don't have those answers. But in consuming this media and consuming this content, it's kind of like we almost get to challenge ourselves to those thoughts, to what we think the answers are. Are people born a certain way? My personal opinion, I just think that no, I don't think people are born bad. I definitely think that genetics can have an impact on people's psyches and people's experiences, because I know that some things like addiction do run in genetics, right? Do run in families, et cetera. And I also know that there's this horrible cycle that happens in regards to abuse and horrible things. And it's due to nurture, really. So I think that there is both sides of it, that sure, genetics can play a part in things because of different illnesses and different predispositions exist, sure. But I also think that nurture is so much a part of it, because similar to, I mentioned this in my last podcast episode too, and I'm like so hung up on it right now, but like this case with the Menendez brothers. This case happened back in the 90s, and I don't know, it's popular right now because a new Netflix documentary came out about it, and a show, and like all this stuff. So it's just at the forefront of my mind right now. But for example, you know, these children were abused very horribly by someone who was supposed to love and care for them. And they grew up in a way that nurtured anger and this cycle of abuse and all these things. And it turns out they turned into killers because of that abuse. Now, am I excusing that? No. But I do think that these cycles and these cycles exist. I think it's the responsibility of the person to break those cycles. With the example with the Menendez brothers, people say, well, yeah, they were horribly abused and that's why they did what they did. Sure. But unfortunately, it does become the responsibility of that person to break that cycle, to not continue the abuse to the next generation. Or, I mean, in their case, I guess they cut it off because they were abused horribly, murdered the parents that were abusing them, and then ended up in jail. So by not having offspring, yeah, in some ways they are ending that cycle, but it's a nurture thing. So at the end of the day, it brings us this kind of need to find out what is the truth, nature versus nurture, what makes a person bad or evil, are we born that way? This question, this big question that feels impossible to answer, and it very well could always continue to be impossible to answer. Another reason that we are so interested, I think, is because think about the news. Think about how you always see these horrible things, but we want to know the answer. We want to know what happened next. We want to know, did that person get convicted of this felony, of this horrible thing? We want to know what their background was that made them do this in the first place. And since like the 50s, the news and media has constantly been covering crime stories. Someone by the name of Mantell, it seems like, according to this article, they're someone who works with the news cycles. They said our fascination with crime is equaled by our fear of crime. And I think that really does hold true. It's like a lot of times people want to know about these things that they want to stay so far from, right? Like it's almost this need to feel protected and to feel prepared in case some sort of crime happens. And it's kind of like, again, finding those answers, like why did this happen? You know, being able to get like a full picture of the situation, I think feeds this sort of innate need within a human being to get the full picture of something. And so it really creates this fascination around crime. It also comes back to the idea of like a train wreck when it's like you so bad, but you can't look away. I don't exactly know why that exists. But I think it seems like it really does come back to the basis of humanity, right? Like that balance that exists in the world. Like many of us hopefully are fortunate enough to not be victims of horrible crime, right? But by learning about it and hearing about these really intense stories, we get almost that feeling of terror and horror. And that almost is like one of those needs to satisfy one of those needs for balance in humanity and in human life. And I'm not saying that's why crime needs to exist by any means. I think that it'll happen naturally even without people making these horrible decisions. But it's almost like this thirst for like a balance, the equilibrium of the world around us, to like see that, because we get really comfortable in our locked little homes and our safety nets that, as we've talked about in a previous podcast episode, are never really, security is an illusion. It's never really real. But I think it also has to do with that. And a professor of criminology at Drew University, I don't exactly know where that is, but this man, he's an author. He wrote for an article for Time. It's basically saying that we have this weird obsession and need to see calamity, to violence. We have this weird fixation on it because of the innate needs, I guess, or innate interests of humanity, of people. And I can say for myself, I am so intrigued. Like, I listen to My Favorite Murder by Karen and Georgia all the time. It is so hard to stop listening to. And I mean, I love the way they do it because they do these intense things and then they surround it by like positivity and comedy, just as a coping mechanism. So it kind of fills all of these things of like looking at it from an outsider standpoint, like the justice system and the crime itself, but then also being able to kind of make it an easier pill to swallow that this stuff really happens. This stuff really happens in the world around us, and we do need to be prepared. We need to be knowledgeable about these things in order to potentially save ourselves from them. Another doctor of psychology, actually at Penn State, was in an interview, and she was explaining that this could be like an evolutionary thing. Like, we find evolutionary benefits in paying attention to the things that could hurt us. Because think about it, when we were cavemen, we paid attention to the patterns of the threats, right? To the weather and to other predators like animals that could essentially hurt us. And now, because those threats have changed so much over time, those threats unfortunately have become other humans, other people that we kind of are evolving to like really lock in and pay attention to these things because it can actually keep us safe in our environment. And I thought that was so like just so fascinating because it's true, right? Just like it's the same idea as just being prepared. If you know that something is potential to hurt you or to do X, Y, and Z, it's the same reason we wear sunscreen, right? Because we know the sun could hurt us if we don't wear it and we're out in the sun all day. Or the same reason we baby-proof corners of things in our homes when there's a new baby around, because we are aware of these potential threats of things that could hurt us. It's kind of like that, just in a way that's like almost a little more removed, because generally true crime is just a random act of violence. Or maybe not random, but like unpredictable act of violence often. And it's kind of just that idea of being prepared for anything. It's also, I don't know, I wish I found more answers truthfully, because I wish I could tell what it was inside of me. Like, I've just been listening to like this 6-hour podcast about the Manson family and like all of that. But for me, in this specific case, like the way that they frame it is they talk about all of the culture of the time of when this was happening and how like the culture really kind of bred this happening. And that's not to, again, excuse the behavior of Manson or the Manson family or any of their behavior, but it's, they kind of go into more depth about not just necessarily that specific person, but how the time, the era, the culture of Los Angeles shaped these horrible crimes during this time. It's so fascinating to me. And, but again, back to the main point, or my first point, it's like that nature versus nurture, like the nurturing of the space around you, like the environment that you're in can often play a role in these things. And like, that's what I believe so much, like so much of it is nurture, because so many, as unfortunate as this is, so many people grow up in horrible situations with really bad childhoods, suffering from abuse and other things, and they don't turn out to be horrible, crime-committing, violent murderers and killers. It really, I guess, comes down to mindset and the ability to shift your perception and perspective, maybe. I don't know. I think there's a lot of... I'm really trying to make this into one simple idea and simple answer in this little 20-minute podcast episode, which I know is so impossible. It's just not how it goes. It's a very complex, nuanced situation, but it is so interesting. Like, why am I even talking about it now, right? That begs the question. It's the same thing. Why am I so interested in why we like it? Why am I so interested in why we're interested about it that I'm making my own source of media about it? Let's talk about Inception, okay? Okay, anyway, I could blabber on about this forever and talk about all these different cases. Like, I find it so just fascinating. I don't know. But anyway, the end of this episode is when I tell you a song that I've been listening to on repeat based on the playlist that Spotify makes for me of what I've been playing on repeat. And I'm really excited because we're almost at the time of year where I get to look at my Spotify Wrapped and look at all of the things that I've been listening to all year long, podcasts, music, different genres, artists, etc. And every year I make a video about it on YouTube. So if you're not subscribed to me over there, do that. It's always in the show notes, I believe. But the song I want to suggest to you right now that I've been listening to on repeat is called Jump by Me and You. It's a nice little kind of like house tune. It's a fun song to dance to and groove to. Definitely an electronic production, but yeah, I really like it. I actually think I found this through my friend Magda, so shout out to Magda for always having the best songs playing in her life. But yeah, it's a really good song. It's like a nice positive. It makes me feel good. So do with that what you will. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about true crime and why we love it today or tonight, whatever time it may be for you. And definitely consider becoming a friend of the podcast, subscribing anywhere that you get your podcasts, and support me as a creator. It means the world to me. If you liked anything that you heard here as well, you can leave me a review. And until next time, take care.